Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Shirley Raitt, and I'm the Dean of the Glasgow School for Business and Society here at Glasgow Caledonian. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to this alumni talk this afternoon, where we've got the honour of hearing from our distinguished speaker and GCU graduate, Chris Adams, General Manager at Microsoft. Chris will share his extensive experience in the tech industry and insights on customer engagement strategies. But first, a little bit more about Chris. Chris leads the global e-commerce business for some of Microsoft's most well-known commercial products, including Microsoft 365 and Teams. With nearly 20 years' experience in the tech industry across consumer and commercial segments, Chris has a unique perspective on what's needed to succeed in a fast-paced environment at the forefront of innovation. His impressive track record includes delivering consecutive years of double-digit growth on multi-billion-dollar revenues, making the transition from Office in a box to a cloud subscription service, and launching Microsoft's new Copilot AI assistant. We're extremely grateful for all your support, Chris, and thrilled to have you back with us this afternoon. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce Chris Adams to deliver this afternoon's talk.
Thank you very much. I love an intro like that. It's always good to get set up for the talk. Obviously don't want to listen too much about talk about myself to kind of boost my own ego too much, but thank you very much for that introduction. It's great to be invited to be back to the university. Glasgow Caledonian was a huge part of kind of what started my career here. So it's great to have an opportunity to come back and talk to you all about some of the things that I've kind of learned along the way. So first off, hello to everyone. As Dr. Shirley and John said, my name's Chris Adams. I lead what we call the modern work and security commercial business at Microsoft. I'm actually based in Redmond, Washington, so while it's a Thursday afternoon for all of you, it's early on Thursday morning for me here in the Pacific Northwest. On the slide here, I've popped a QR code. If any of you scan that, it will take you to my LinkedIn profile, so you can see a little bit more about the background that I have, if that's kind of interesting to you. But when I talk about this idea of modern work and security, commercial direct businesses, e-commerce, what does that kind of jargon all mean? At a very high level, me and my team are responsible for selling Microsoft products to small businesses when they want to purchase directly from Microsoft. As Dr. Shirley mentioned, that's products that many of you may use, like Microsoft 365, Teams, our new Copilot product as well. And when I think about what the team really spends our time on, first part is really about making sure we have an amazing customer experience so that anyone that wants to purchase from us has a low friction customer experience. They can buy the product easily, they can get up and running, and they can be successful in what they want to be successful using our technology. And then the second part is really around this idea about being accountable for growth. Unsurprisingly, Microsoft is a for-profit business. The businesses that we work on, it's about how do we effectively grow that and grow profit for Microsoft as part of it. So how did I end up here today in this kind of Thursday morning talking to all of you? Well, it really started when I was a kid. I'll be kind of honest. My early teen years, I was a bit of a geek. I loved everything technology related, and I really kind of knew that I wanted to pursue a career in this kind of space over time. I was also really lucky that the business studies course that I did at Caledonian actually had a placement year as part of it. So in my third year of my degree, I had an opportunity to apply to different companies to potentially have the chance to go work for them for a year and gain industry experience as part of my university course as well. And I knew companies like Microsoft and other tech companies had programs like this, but I also knew competition was super fierce to get some of these placements and then super hard to kind of get onto some of these schemes. But someone had said to me at one point, and it's something that I definitely carry through today, you never win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket. So the way I kind of approached a lot of this was hey, if I don't apply for this, I can never get the job. So through the placement year, through the placement application process, I completed my intern application with Microsoft. I had very low expectations of getting through. Competition was fierce. But as I kind of rolled through the different parts of the process in terms of there was a local interview in Glasgow and then one in Edinburgh, and then they took me down to the Microsoft office in Reading, I was lucky enough to kind of move forward, and that's really how I got my internship at Microsoft, which really kind of started the story that I'm going to kind of tell you a bit more about today. So like a huge, I kind of look back very fondly with my memories of my time at Caledonian, but more importantly, the structure of the course and the way that the course worked was really the thing that gave me a head start in terms of my career and helped make me successful in terms of moving forward in this industry. So I kind of always like to look at my career in a kind of a handful of numbers. I've only ever had one job other than the couple of things that I've only ever worked for one company other than the couple of jobs that I might have had at college for some extra money. And I've actually been here for 18 years now. So really since the day I graduated to talking to you today, my entire career has kind of been spent at Microsoft. Kind of interesting fact that I thought in the modern world, less than 10% of people will spend their career with one employer. And I think that especially skews to the younger generation now, where the average time that most people will spend with a company is about 4 years. So the idea that I've spent the last kind of 18 years at this company will kind of give you an idea about some of the learning and some of the experiences that I've kind of had that have ultimately kind of kept me here. I was lucky enough to spend 6 years in the Microsoft subsidiary, which is just outside London, where I spent the majority of my time learning about the UK business. And then I was lucky enough, round about the summer of 2012, to actually move to the Microsoft head office in Redmond, Washington, and start looking at the business from kind of a global perspective. So that's really two continents. I've been lucky enough to work in the UK and also in the US as well. During that 18 years, I've had about 10 different jobs. So I'm running on that kind of average a year and a half, 2 years in the different roles that I've had. All of that has some way been associated with Microsoft's kind of productivity software business. So even though I've worked at a company that sells lots of products, it has been within the divisions that kind of look at our kind of more general productivity for consumers and businesses. I've had 9 managers during my time, and I feel incredibly lucky about the people that I've had an opportunity to work for during my tenure. I think you'll hear a lot. Some people say it's more important the manager you work for than the job you have. I am someone that can 100% attest to that now, and I also feel that I'm lucky enough in a position now as I think about the next steps in my career. I now look at jobs based on who do I want to work for than what is some of the work that I want to do as well, just given the really positive impact your manager can have on you and your growth there as well. And since 2017, I became a people manager myself. I've been lucky enough during that time to have over 60 people kind of work for me in various roles at different times. And I'll be super honest with all of you. Like when I made that transition from being what we call at Microsoft an individual contributor to being a manager, it wasn't something that I was totally sure I kind of wanted to do. It was an unknown. Like managing people is a very different aspect of a job. And for someone who was always very focused on like, hey, I just want to be the best at being me, starting to think about having to look after a broader group of people was something that was pretty interesting and a little bit scary kind of at the same time. Two things that have kind of happened since then in that front. I kind of reflect back to the point that I made about the 9 managers that I've had. I can name every one of them. I can say what they did well. I can talk about the impact that they've had in my life. And I kind of think about how fondly I kind of look at that and the role that they've played. And then I was like, well, great. Now I'm in a position that I will have an opportunity to play that role for other people and hopefully allow them to have a positive experience and make frankly, their time at work, their career as enjoyable and as fulfilling as it possibly can be as they think about what they kind of need to do as well. And a bit like I said, who I work for is probably number one criteria for jobs that I look for. I would probably say now the most fulfilling part of the job that I have is the role that I have in kind of developing talent and kind of growing people inside the organization. It becomes that kind of super fulfilling part, and that's more important to me in certain extents than how much revenue do we drive, how big the growth is, what products do we launch. It's having that ability to kind of impact people on a kind of a much kind of broader scale as well. So that's just a kind of a couple of numbers that provide a little bit of context into my career so far. I kind of look at my career and what I would say is kind of three stages. The and I'm going to say so far, I'm hopefully not at the end of my career. I've probably got another 15, 20 years to go before I'm going to be able to retire. So it's three stages thus far. And I'll talk through a little bit of the experiences that I've kind of gained and some of the stuff that I've kind of worked on here. So when I first joined, like I said, I joined Microsoft straight out of Caledonian. I was firmly in what I kind of refer to as the early in career part. I was literally called out of university and dropped in a large matrix global organization that I kind of needed to work out how to be successful in. In terms of like the tech industry, this was the time where I spent time working in many of the products that you're all familiar with, Windows and Office. And at that point in the tech industry, these were all still sold in a box at retail. You could go into a Dixon's or a PC World and it would be a box and a shelf. Or we would sell business agreements to businesses. But these were really products that launched in a 3-year cycle. And every time the product launched, we had a big launch event. We tried to sell it to lots of people for 3 years. And then the cycle started again and again and again from that point of view. And that was some of the biggest projects that I worked on when I kind of started at Microsoft. Office 2007 was launched literally a couple of months after I joined Microsoft. So I was a very small cog in a very large launch experience there. But by the time the 3 years had passed when Office 2010 came to market, I'd actually put myself in a position to be the leader of the overall launch in the UK, which was kind of interesting, being like the press spokesperson for the launch, having to talk to journalists about what we were doing and lots of kind of things as well. And then I also had the opportunity to work in a big project, which was essentially really turning, at the time, Microsoft's website, Microsoft.com, was one of the most visited websites on the internet. And we started this kind of project of like, how do we turn that, as well as a product information website, how do we turn that into kind of an e-commerce experience where not only can people find out about our products, but they can also buy and kind of purchase as part of that. And that was a little bit of a departure from Microsoft on its kind of traditional way of selling things, which to that point in time had predominantly been working with kind of third parties as well. So really kind of interesting projects that taught me a lot. A couple of things that I would say, like big learnings that I took away from this phase of my career is like I kind of joke about the basics of work. At that time, I remember what it was like to having to be at work every day at 9 a.m. and be there all day, having certain amounts of work that I needed to deliver, being able to stay on top of things like my email volume and calendar management. There was just literally the basics of being in a working environment at a large company where many of your peers and the people that you're working with might have 5, 10, 15, 20 years of experience. And it was very quickly kind of being caught up on like the basics of actually what it's like to work every day at a kind of a large company. I remember I had a previous boss that used to talk about that. It was like, hey, can you do your work without leaving bodies everywhere behind you? And it was a really kind of interesting example that's kind of stuck with me of like, hey, when we bring early in career people in, can they actually just do the basics of work as part of it? It was the first time I'd ever really had accountability for something where I was responsible. I was the responsible individual for delivering on a project or delivering on something that was kind of material at the company. And as part of that, I needed to understand like how did we get to targets? How did we get to KPIs? How was the performance working? Where were we having gaps? How are we going to kind of address those issues? And it was that real idea of like, hey, I'm actually responsible for this, and I need to be in a position to talk about and manage it from a kind of a position of accountability. and thinking about all the things that were kind of important as an owner, as a part of a business, rather than just, hey, someone who was kind of working on something for someone else. Similar to the kind of the basics of work, there's this kind of idea of effectively working with other people. The bigger the company you work for, I think there's a general correlation to the less work that you do directly as an individual. There is normally some engagement with other people at different parts of the company. And part of that early career is, look, we're all individuals. We all have different perspectives and things. Actually just learning how to be a good colleague to people and work on things with other people to kind of get the outcomes that you need was kind of a super important thing. And I think about, the hurdles that I kind of fell on there, which was because my boss told me something was important. I would be running over to other parts of the company and going, hey, my boss has told me this is important. You need to care about it. And they would be like, well, it's not important for us. And you're creating a whole bunch of churn and noise, and like, that's not how we work. We need to think about how we partner together and how we kind of get to the collective outcomes that you wanted. So that's that kind of example. And then finally, this idea of, building networks is essential. I have been incredibly lucky. Like I said, I joined Microsoft as part of a graduate scheme. I think the class of my graduate scheme was about 22 people that year back in 2000 and 2007. I'm probably still in contact with at least 10 of them. And, lots of them are at different companies now. Some of them are at different roles at Microsoft. And then, as I think about that and the network that I've kind of built from there on out, it just becomes super important to kind of get stuff done. People work with other people, and that's the kind of the crux at the end of the day. So the more relationships you have, the more connections you have with people, the trust that you build up with other individuals in a company is something that can be hugely important for you and can actually help accelerate you as you kind of move kind of through an organization. So I know a lot of these might sound like, hey, these are really simple, straightforward learnings, but honestly, as a 20-something, 21, 22-year-old, this stuff wasn't straightforward at the time, and they were super important as I landed in a big company that made millions and millions of dollars, of how I needed to show up and kind of effectively work inside that organization. The second phase for me, this was actually around about the time that I moved to the US. I went very deep on our kind of consumer business at that point in time. And this was around about the time where I was what we call at Microsoft like a senior IC. So I was a senior employee, but I was responsible for myself. And then my kind of transition into being kind of a people manager was really this kind of second stage of the growth that I kind of had. In terms of what was going on in the industry at the time, this was really when we were starting to make some pretty big changes to the Microsoft business model. Like I said, up until the previous point, Microsoft used to release a new version of Windows and a new version of Office every 3 years. It was almost a cycle that you could plan your watch to. And the entire business model was built around you sell it, people use it, you sell it, people use it. And we were starting to make this transition into the idea of being a productivity subscription. And the idea was this would be something that you would always pay for. You would always get the latest and greatest versions of the products. Microsoft would run it on our cloud infrastructure rather than it being something that you, as a business or as a consumer, had to do a lot on your own to kind of get it up and running. We kind of took a lot on there. And this was actually a huge change for the company and actually a pretty huge change for the industry. And there were lots of Microsoft competitors that didn't successfully make this transition. And there were lots of companies that newly appeared. Like we would say that competitors like Google were born in the cloud. They never really had this idea of like selling software in a box. They were born in the time when everything was on the internet and everything was kind of online. So the couple of the projects there that were super interesting as part of that kind of big transition. Like every company that you work for will be under the pressure to make more money and spend less money doing it. That's essentially how we get to profit. We sell more and we spend as little money as possible to make that kind of business transition happen. So a lot of what I spent my time on in those roles at that point in time was thinking about how we worked with the people that sold our products. So at the time, if you think about the UK, most of the products that we sold were sold through PC World. If you're in the US, that would be someone like Best Buy. And it was really kind of simple math for them. The Office in a Box product that they'd sold for £100, and they made a percentage margin on that product, and that was how they thought about it, and they'd worked out where we fitted in their business in terms of a priority based on how much money they could make selling that. When we moved to subscription, because you weren't buying the product once and you were buying it every month or every year, the cost of the product actually dropped quite materially. We went from a £120 product to a £50 product. So the retailers were kind of like, well, I'm going to make less money here now. Are you going to give me more margin? Are we going to make more money? Like, how do we think about the kind of profitability that we have there as well? So there was lots and lots of kind of deep conversations as we made this transition that we knew was right for the company. How did we also work with the people that actually sold our products to help them understand that it was going to be right for them over the kind of the years that followed? And then another area, like talking about how we spend money, we spend lots of money, tens of millions of dollars a year on search engine marketing, display advertising, social media, and those types of things. The time that the industry was at the moment was very focused on what were called like cost per click or cost per acquisition measures. So you would see reporting from the agencies that we worked with that would say things like, hey, every click cost you 28 cents. Or every person that acquired your product cost you $12. And that was typically how the success of media was measured at that point in time. And we went through this relatively large piece of work to kind of move this industry to what we kind of called a lifetime value approach. One of the things about a subscription product is it normally has a lifetime value of that customer associated with it. So then as we were thinking about how did we acquire customers, we were starting to make a lot of decisions about, if the lifetime value of a customer is X, how much of that X should you be willing to spend to acquire that customer to recognize that money over the next 4 or 5 years? So these were kind of really fundamentally interesting projects that really at the kind of the heart of like a global company kind of got to how we essentially worked in multiple markets around the world and how we thought about this kind of core idea of like profitability in our business and how we could drive higher returns for the company. So the couple of key things that I learned during that time is this idea of like, hey, when you're a company that sells something and you require someone else to sell it, there is a huge amount of complexity kind of comes to your business is part of that, because you have to have that third party to care about your product. You need to have all their employees trained in understanding how to talk about it and how to sell it. You need to understand how they think about their profitability and how they make money. And so much of that was, as we were making this structural shift as a company, how did we align up all the changes that we were making to what a third party did? And that frankly gave me a huge amount of appreciation for, there's the old saying of like, hey, you should always live a day in someone else's shoes. And we would always go into these meetings with partners like, PC World or Best Buy, and we would be, Microsoft's revolutionizing the world. You guys are going to make a ton of money. And they would sit there being like, hey, you realize we're a retail business and this is how we think about our business. This is how we talk to our leadership and shareholders about how we're going to be profitable. You guys need to understand that and think about that so we can continue to kind of work together in the future as well. The second one is really, this was one of the points where I was starting to get into hey, I have great ideas that I think could move the business forward and kind of create some growth opportunities for us. I think one of the things here that I started to learn is there is a huge difference between an idea and that idea getting to the point of execution. And it's really, really easy to be the ideas person. It is incredibly hard to be the person that can execute on those ideas as well. But believe it or not, when you can bring those two things together, of having great ideas that you can then turn into reality, there are not a lot of people that are good at both sides of that equation, and it's something that definitely helped me kind of move forward in the organization. There was this idea of kind of optimizing for the global maxima. I work at a very large company that we sell lots of different products and lots of different segments. I knew what I had been tasked with in terms of what outcomes and goals we had to achieve. And there were certain ways that we could have gone and achieved those things and kind of been successful. But when you work at a bigger company, the decision that the left hand makes can't be at the expense or cause issues for the right hand of the company. And there are going to be many situations that as we kind of started to look left to right, it's like, this is the best idea to do what we need to do. This is not the best idea for Microsoft. And it meant that lots of times that you actually needed to understand a lot more about other parts of the business and how the things that you did would impact on them. So you could make decisions that would collectively optimize for Microsoft, even though your job was only working on the consumer business for Microsoft 365. We needed to understand the kind of the broader aspect of that. And honestly, that could, in many occasions, I think when you're a little bit earlier, it's the first time that you come across it, it's very disheartening. You've normally spent a huge amount of time coming up with great ideas, you've built business cases, you've tried to get a whole bunch of excitement. And because of something that's not directly related to you, the company decides not to do it. It's a little bit of a kind of a disheartening, almost sometimes feels like a little bit of a kind of a step back. But that's kind of why I'm saying, like, as long as you can understand that, like the global maxima idea, I think it can be really helpful in understanding the decisions that many companies kind of make there. And then there's this idea that the customer at the center of everything you do. There are so many businesses that are focused like on how do we maximize revenue. One of the things I've always appreciated at Microsoft is if we have a great customer experience and we treat our customers well, revenue falls. And we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we put the customer at the center of our experiences. If we're going to make a change, how will the customer understand that? If we're going to add new value, how will the customer find out about it? And there's very little argument in almost any situation. If you're sitting with colleagues or different teams, people can have lots of debates about business cases and assumptions and how you got to numbers and what the outcome's going to be. If you go into those conversations and say, this is fundamentally a bad decision for our customer because, it's really hard for anyone to argue with that. And it gives you a really kind of a strong position in conversations of like, hey, I'm really being the advocate for the people that if we don't have them, we don't have a business. So I'm going to continue to advocate and really push for the customer at the center. As I kind of mentioned in my opening slide, this was around about halfway through this period. I kind of became a manager for the first time. I was a bit unsure about what it was going to be be like. And I'll be honest, like it was a pretty hard transition for me. I was used to being in control of my day, in control of my output. I knew exactly what needed to be done. I set a very high standard and bar for myself. That switch from I am going to work to I am going to work through other people can be quite a hard one to make. And it starts to think about, well, people have different working styles, what are people's different skill sets, how do I organize the work in my team, how do I manage the work that needs to happen, how do I deal with performance issues. There is essentially a rule of numbers that if you have a team of 20 people, you will probably have 3 or 4 high performers and you will probably have 3 or 4 people that aren't performing as well. And you need to think about kind of managing and balancing that kind of stuff as well. So there was a real kind of tension of like, hey, I wanted to be this super successful individual, but I also wanted to build my career and kind of go forward and starting to make some of those changes, which is kind of been tough. And I think for a lot of people, the skills that are required to be a manager are very different from the skills that are required to be successful. And you need to think about this as a relatively big step in your career and start to think about things like, well, how do I want people to think about me as a manager? What do I want to be known for? What are the types of things that I want people to do? How am I going to deal with these situations? And the more that you can think about that before you get there, the more helpful it kind of is and helps you kind of make that transition a little bit easier. But it is, at least for me, it was certainly not an easy kind of transition to make and really kind of pressured me on the skills that I needed to develop. And then the final one is, look, burnout is real. I think, historically and maybe particularly in Scotland as well, like mental health was not a big thing that a lot of people are particularly kind of comfortable in talking about. Like burnout in a fast-paced environment is real. You don't often realize what's going on. You're on the hook for these massive numbers. You're running teams. People talk about work-life balance. I kind of talk about this idea of your work life influences your home life and your home life influences your work life. It's not this idea of, hey, there's a perfect scale of these two separate things that are kind of balanced. So when you're having stress and challenges at work, that can often lead into stress and challenges at home. And often when you have challenges at home, that can lead into things and kind of your work environment as well. So I spent I'll be honest, I had a rough learning experience about, kind of being hit in the face by some real kind of burnout issues a couple of years after becoming a people manager and having to take very big corrective steps to kind of get myself back to a good place versus, hey, hopefully now a lot more people are a lot more thoughtful about some of these things and the way towards them, rather than kind of being slapped in the face with it at a certain point in their career as well. So really that focus on mental health and your individual health and well-being as part of your career is super important as well. And I say that not because it's going to help you in your career. Yeah, it's going to help you in your career. More importantly, it's going to help you as an individual as well, because like I said, your experience at work translates into your experience in your home life and other types of things as well. And then the final stage where I see myself just now, we're kind of in what I would kind of call this security and AI focus of the industry. I'm sure many of you see things in the news frequently about, I think there was the NHS a few years ago, was that, it had a large scale attack. Many of you will get random emails from airlines or credit cards saying, hey, your customer data has been impacted, keep an eye on your credit score. So there's this just huge cybersecurity pressure in the industry as technology kind of infuses every single part of our lives. How do we work to essentially make sure that we keep our customers safe from the threats that kind of exist out there in the broader world? So that's been a huge focus. We spend lots of times around about things like elections, and we work with both parties in most elections to make sure their campaigns are protected and various kind of other things. But this big idea of cybercrime and cybersecurity is a huge kind of area in the industry. And then obviously in the last 12, 18 months, this idea of AI or artificial intelligence becoming far more mainstream has certainly become a huge part of how we kind of think of things as well. I kind of look at this stage as actually where I kind of moved away from being a manager to being a leader. And again, that's another kind of transition where the skills are a little bit kind of different, and the experiences you kind of get are different here as well. When we think about AI, particularly in the transition, as technology moves forward, there is pretty much always a gap between the innovation that happens and then as kind of customers adopt it. A lot of the time and effort that we're focused on at the moment is how do we reduce these gaps between the innovation happening and customers kind of getting to take advantage of it. And in the world of AI, for those of you who don't know, the data centers that run a lot of these AI products, they use very expensive things that are called graphics processing units or GPUs. In our data centers, they are very expensive to buy. They consume high levels of energy to do a lot of these AI related tasks. So the pressure for us to move into kind of a profitable world there is kind of super important in that one. So just kind of hitting through a couple of the things here. Like I said, big projects that I've worked on, the launch of Copilot, that really kind of plays to how do we take this AI innovation and kind of bring it to more customers more quickly. Cybersecurity, the projects here have been in kind of two sides. One round about the idea of, like I said, how do we keep our customers protected? But as the idea of an e-commerce business as well, we are frequently targeted with large-scale attacks round about taking advantage of the products that we create for nefarious kind of activities as well. So a lot of focus around about cybersecurity. And then stealing a little bit of a kind of a US sports metaphor, if any of you have ever watched American football, you hear lots of ideas about playbooks. There are so many plays that can happen in American football. I kind of look at a lot of what my team's jobs to do is to keep writing the new pages for our business playbook. Continuing to do what you do today is not going to get you to the next kind of position in the market. So a lot more investment in future strategy and future kind of sales motions and stuff like that there. So a couple of key learnings. There is a difference between business leadership and business management. You start to look at the skills that you want to see. You want your peers, your colleagues, other people within the organization to basically be like, hey, Chris, he leads that business. I understand when we have questions or we have stuff going on, he's the person that I'm going to go work for. So starting to move away from, hey, I'm just a person that kind of manages a team, to like, hey, no, I am seen as a strategic business leader in the company, and other leaders in other parts of the company kind of come to you and look for you as success. Delivering outcomes at scale. For this, as you move up in an organization, the size of impact you need to have becomes more important. If an idea is not going to scale, then it's not a great idea. And it's almost, that's one of the number one things, especially when you work in like a global company or a company that has tens of millions of customers. Saying that you've got an idea that's going to add another 50,000 customers is interesting, but it's not as interesting as something that's going to add 100,000 or 200,000 more. Change is hard in large organizations. We talk a lot about this idea of like businesses can often be like oil tankers. And there can be a big difference between when you kind of give the command to change direction and when the organization kind of moves there as well. So even in tech, where we think we're super agile, we think we're super quick, change is hard in the organization, and it's something that takes time to get kind of used to, that you can't always move fast, you can't always move quick. You need to get consensus, you need to work through other parts of the organization, you need to kind of move and kind of get stuff done as well. As you become a bigger leader, this idea that I probably invest a third of my time is really focused on the kind of the last three here, which is really about this idea of I don't deliver output anymore, I deliver a team that delivers output for the company. So I really think about how do I build the highest performing team? How do I hire talent that frankly is smarter than me and can hold me accountable and can push me harder? And how do I think about those types of things? Like I said, the transition from becoming an individual to a manager was hard. There is another harder transition when you start to manage managers who manage the team, and your ability to be close to the business, involved in decisions and things like that as well. So there's another layer of kind of comfort in there, and how do I not just work through people, but how do I literally work through teams of people, and how do I manage these teams in kind of an effective way? And then I'll kind of close a little bit in the kind of the famous Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. That's really why I kind of spend so much time on this one. Like, if you have a great team culture, I have about 25 people in my team just now. We spend a lot of time invested in team culture. And that means that as the business is tough or we're trying to do new things that are hard, the culture actually continues to make it a really enjoyable place to work. It is a differentiator in attracting talent to the team and to the company. And it really does, we could have the best ideas, but if we don't work together, we don't have that innovation of culture and sharing, it kind of becomes super hard. So I think as you think about moving up in an organization, like, again, think about great managers you've had or managers you would like. Think about great leaders that you've seen as well. And as you start to take steps into that, what is the type of leader you want to be? What is the culture you want to create in that organization? How do you build trust with employees? How do you allow them to talk about anything that they kind of want to talk about? How do you understand tough challenges in an organization and kind of help people move forward as well? So that's my kind of 3 stages of my career. If I ever get invited back in 10 years, there might be a 4th one that kind of gets added on to this if stuff continues to go well. But hopefully that was just between, the couple of things, just a little bit about, hey, what's it like to kind of work in a tech company? But hopefully, I hope that many of you can kind of take away from the learnings. I think these are going to be pretty unique across most companies and most things out there. And can you take some of the learnings that maybe were a bit harder for me to get to, or I got to them later in my career than I maybe would have liked, and you can apply them from kind of earlier on, and hopefully start thinking about some of this stuff before, or applying some of it earlier, and hopefully it will give you some things to kind of think about in terms of your career. So I'll pass it back to you, Shirley.
Thanks very much, Chris. That was a fabulous talk. We've got a whole host of questions for you that have been pre-submitted. So I'm going to pick up on some of them. There was loads, because there's loads of interest in you and your career. So I'll pick on some that relate to some of the things you've spoken about today. So first of all, in terms of you and your career, you mentioned things about mental health, which I think is really something that's really relevant today in terms of how we speak about it at the university. So I'm wondering if you can talk us through what mechanisms you've used to handle job-related stress in your career, particularly in such a fast-paced, stressful environment like Microsoft.
Sure. Look, the first thing with I think any problem that you have in your life is the willing to acknowledge it's real and it can have an impact on what you do. There's a great saying that I think I got from someone, which is like when if you're not understanding how you feel about things or what it is, it's kind of tough to know. When you know the symptoms of stress or you know how you feel about it, there's this kind of idea that you name it to tame it. So it's like, hey, at the end of the day, I am feeling like X. They're things of stress. That stress, I need to deal with that is actually quite important. So this first kind of thing of like acknowledging what the kind of feelings and symptoms for you are and being willing to say, hey, I'm pretty stressed out. Like, I need to do something about this is absolutely the first kind of part of it. I talked a little bit about this idea of like, I'm not a work life balance person, I'm more a work life equilibrium person. Stress is not something that you can compartmentalize. And particularly in the current environment where we're always connected, many of us have access to email at home, and we're kind of moving around. It's super hard to kind of compartmentalize, and I think that's really important to kind of understand that stress doesn't just show up in the way that you have kind of context and conversations and how you feel about work. It can show up in your relationship with your children, the relationship with your partners, and those kind of things that go on as well. So a couple of the things that I've kind of found that have been really useful is the first one is to talk about it. Like generally, I kind of have this joke of I literally have a work bestie, and we have this time where we vent about stuff that isn't going well, and that release of like I had a bad day, you had a bad day, great, we both had a bad day. What are we going to do about it? Like there's just something that is helpful about talking to people, especially people that have the context of the stuff that you're talking about. And obviously, kind of builds up a lot of trust, trust in someone, especially at work, to be able to talk about what's not going well. So, be very clear. Like, find someone that you can be a trusted person in your circle and talk about stuff that's not going well. Think about family, friends, whoever else you can confide in. For me, it's a big part of my wife. She doesn't have necessarily the context of when I complain about this meeting or whatever. She doesn't necessarily know what's going on. But again, me being able to verbalize it and talk to someone about it is kind of super helpful. And then again, from time to time, if you need it, professional help is absolutely there. Most companies have programs and various other things, and the more we can remove any stigma of having a conversation with someone who knows a lot about something and how you feel about things is great. Like, we should take advantage of it. Super empowering and super helpful. More of the kind of the smaller tactical things, like I think get moving. I have a stand up desk at work. I frequently, if I have a half an hour gap between meetings, I'll take my dogs for a walk around the neighborhood or get out. If I do happen to be in the office, I walk, just round outside the Microsoft buildings to kind of get out, get the blood flowing, get a little bit of a break from a screen or whatever's kind of going on there. I know a lot of people find the gym is a great way of, kind of getting rid of stress and extra energy and stuff like that. You'll find the things like physical exercise that work for you. It might be yoga, it might be meditation, whatever it is, but kind of get that kind of moving. And then sleep is super important. And I know, like, I'm kind of in that stage of have a big I have 3 kids under 10 at home, so I have a very busy home life as well. But making sure that we kind of get that sleep is super important. A really funny one, some of you might find this a little bit funny as well. We actually did some research at Microsoft during COVID, which was talking about the work from home experience and how it relates to mental health. A lot of people don't realize that when you were in the office, your commute actually became a barrier or a decompression time between your work life and your home life. So like, you walk out the university, you get on a bus or whatever, by 20 minutes later, by the time you're home, you've had a chance to kind of process stuff and with it. The only thing that's between my work and my family is the door of my home office. So we actually did some research about this idea of adding a fake commute. And my wife thought this was a hilarious idea, but she would message me like, hey, are you finished at work? And I would be like that, yeah, but I need 20 minutes for my commute. And that's where I would like social media and my phone, I would do something else, but I would stay in here and decompress a little bit before getting out and kind of spending time with the family and stuff like that as well. So yeah, they would be the couple of things like nothing wrong, like know the behaviors, know how it shows up in yourself, be totally willing to talk about it and engage with help where you need it. And then think about how you keep moving and get sleep and all the right things that are going to set you up for kind of success there.
Fantastic. That's really helpful, I suspect, for everybody that's listening, and that nobody's immune from this. So it's really helpful to hear your context. So there's some questions around your job, and it would be interesting for you to talk through a little bit about managing people. So we've got a question from one of our participants around how do you successfully leverage your team on all of the multiple facets while clear separation of duties and clarity for each team member. So a bit about how you manage your teams.
Yeah, I think role clarity is the single biggest thing that I can give to individuals that work for me or work in my company or work in my team. Every large, particularly larger companies, just naturally has very, very big overlaps. I joke with many people that work for me that is like if you're on a call or a meeting and it doesn't sound like someone else has the same job with you, you're not connected to the right people. That's just one of the challenges of big organizations. So I spend a huge amount of time, and it may sound simple, but I spend time with my leadership team. We invest in it. We work out what work needs to be done, how we're going to align it to the resources that we've got available, and then we write it down and then we share it amongst all the people in the team. So every one of the three managers that work for me, everyone in their team has a list of what the key results they're going to drive towards and the work that they kind of need to do. And then as part of that, we actually write like where are you going to work with other people in our team and where are you going to work with other people at Microsoft. So there's like it's a small thing, but it's a small thing, but actually spending the time to write it down can be a huge thing. I generally find that most of the friction comes from where organizational boundaries touch. Like it's quite easy for me to rationalize stuff inside my team when I'm working with other teams at Microsoft who have different leaders. That's where it can be a little bit where more of the tension can kind of come from as well. And what I kind of say to my team is like you should always try and solve stuff by yourself. If you're finding that someone you work with in another group is arguing with you about the work that you do or the work that they do, go solve it yourself. You're all big kids. You get paid a lot of money for the jobs that you do. Go work it out. But I also tell them that they basically have a week to work it out. And if they're not making progress in a week, that's when they use their manager. I kind of give their manager a week. And then I want it to kind of come to me. I think we often, with many of these issues, we sit and we let problems kind of fester between teams. And what I want us to do is like, I want the two individuals to try and work together. And if they can't do it, then their manager and the other person's manager should talk and we should work out if we can do it. And then it should go up to my level and we should kind of have kind of conversations about it as well. So it's empowering them to resolve their own issues. But I also don't want people to go for a month where it feels that they don't have clarity or they don't understand what they do or they feel that they're being challenged by another team to kind of do that. Because, talking about, role clarity, that is one of the things that will destroy culture is people not knowing what their job is.
Excellent, thank you. So we've got a question around the products and tech at Microsoft. So can you talk us through how Microsoft uses user cases and other analytics to implement new products and engage new audiences?
Yeah, I kind of think about these as there's like two sides to a coin of how you decide what markets and what audiences we're gonna enter. There's normally one that I would say is really grounded in the customer need, which is more of the product and kind of engineering led side of it. Like, how do we know there's a customer need? What do we think that kind of customer need is? And we can do that through like for some of our large enterprise customers, like they literally tell us, they're like, Microsoft, your product's deficient here, build these features and we will buy more of your product. when you work directly with people, you get those listening mechanisms. We do large amounts of research studies where we go out and talk to people and understand what they kind of need and what they know. And then honestly, some of it in the customer need set is a bet. I think Steve Jobs is very famous for saying if you asked, I think if you asked someone in the 1800s what a car should be like, they would say a faster horse. They didn't know that they needed a car. So like there is lots of the job that we have as product builders is to try and work out what is the need that a customer has that they don't know that they have yet. And a lot of that is done through things like we do personas, use cases, lots of research into these things. We talk to lots of people, and then on the product side, that kind of gets us to like, hey, we should work out what we're going to build to kind of meet this need. Then in the flip side of it, the flip side of the coin, look, we're a business. I kind of joked about, Microsoft being for profit. Businesses enter into markets to make money normally. So like you can have a great product that meets a customer need. If you can't make any money from it, is that where you should really be extending your capital and resources as a company? So we have another side of the organization that spends a lot of time on how should we monetize this? Is it a subscription? Is it a paid once thing? Does it go into an existing product? Would people be willing to pay for this? How much would they be willing to pay for it? And all these kind of things that we kind of need to think about there, like how much will the company need to invest to be successful in this market? If we said, hey, we're gonna launch a rival to Facebook, the amount of money that you would need to put in to remove an incumbent in the market would be huge. So you need to think about those types of things as part of those kind of decisions as well. So they're like a lot of the things that happen, what I would kind of say in early stage. I think as products are released and we've got kind of ideas, we then spend a lot of time on product telemetry and how people are using it, how frequently they're using it. Are they taking advantage of the features that we put in? Can we help them use it better? Can we make changes that will improve their lives or make kind of things easier as well? So there is that kind of upfront, which I would, kind of going back to, university days, a lot of primary and secondary research to kind of give you the best case of like, well, what do we think we should do? Because we don't know. We think we should do this. Then once you've decided that you're going to do the thing, then like, hey, we can actually then start to collect a lot of real world data about these scenarios. You can match back to the personas, you can match back to the use cases. Did we achieve that? Did we help these people? And if not, how do we continue to improve and evolve on that one?
Excellent. So I've left the most challenging question till last. So just with our last couple of minutes, what major developments do you see coming in the next 5, 10, 15 years? And what would you recommend to our tech students and probably business students?
Yeah, I'll take a little bit of a joke on that one of like, if I had any idea about what was going to happen in years, I'd be setting up a hedge fund. I probably wouldn't be working at Microsoft. But I could kind of give you some like a couple of kind of broad thoughts in here. Like the two hottest trends in the industry at the moment are security and AI. I think anything that kind of touches these respectful areas, I think are super important. The world is going to continue to be a disrupted and ever-changing place. And how we think and there's going to be more technology in it. How do we think about securing these systems, preventing cyber attacks, government interference in elections and all these things? There's going to be a huge amount of rules and work that's going to exist in that space. And AI is going to continue to evolve. And I think a lot of the better you can understand about how AI works and take advantage of these technologies and use them more effectively, I think it'll be super, super important. These are like, I would kind of call like industry level shifts. Almost every company or every government is having discussions about these areas every day. About how does the UK government think about AI? How does the UK government think about cybersecurity? How does Europe think about cybersecurity? How does the UN think about it? These are just like massive secular trends that are kind of going on. So any way that you can learn or somewhat lean into that stuff, I think is super helpful there. The one thing I would also say as well is like, industry trends move. You as an individual kind of stay the consistent part. Soft skills, transferable skills are hugely important. I work with some of the smartest people that are out there who cannot stand up in front of someone and have a conversation. So, like, think about the transferable skills that you've got. Do you know how to break down problems? Do you know how to communicate effectively with senior leaders? Do you know how to summarize complex issues? Do you know how to build a story or a narrative around about things? Are you comfortable presenting and talking in groups? Like, all these things are relevant of kind of what's happening around about you. These are the things that, in many cases, lots of people are going to look at as like, hey, I need everyone to be able to do that for the jobs that I hire for, and then you can kind of work out some other things kind of around about that as well.
Some excellent advice to our students to finish off there, Chris. Thank you very much. So we've run out of time, so I'm afraid to say I think we could spend a lot more time talking to you, but we've got a 4 o'clock deadline. So it just leaves me to say a huge thanks to you, Chris, for your talk today. It's been great to hear your story. You've got such a wide-ranging career and a set of experiences at Microsoft, and I think it's really inspiring to hear your story in the webinar today. For me, it's wonderful to hear that the placement during your studies was a grounding for your successful career, and I think it just emphasises our message to our students that real experience does put you in a really strong position as a graduate. So thank you again, and thank you everyone for attending this afternoon.
No, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.